Now we know that aggregate of the payment received in money and monetary value of the act or forbearance will constitute consideration. That means the payment for providing service does not need that it should be received always in money. If it received in any other form, then it may be form part of the consideration. Example or illustration for this purpose is that a sports club agreed to hire the service of the cricket player of Mr. B for a consideration of Rs 2 crore. In addition to this, the agreement provides that the player shall be provided with the car value of Rs 20 lakh. So here the monetary consideration, the monetary payment is Rs 2 crore, but the benefit that is being provided to the sportsman in kind amounts to Rs 20 lakh. Here the entire amount of Rs 2 crore for monetary consideration against the service plus Rs 20 lakh, that means the consideration that is provided in kind, that means the car that is provided to that sportsman. So the entire amount comes to Rs 2 crore 20 lakh is the full amount of the consideration, is to be treated as the full amount of the consideration on which GST is to be imposed. So consideration may be generated in terms of monetary value, in terms of cash consideration, in terms of cash, or it may generate in terms of by any other means also. Next, Mr. X sells office furniture to Mr. Y on the consideration that on the condition that donation of Rs 10,000 is payable by Mr. Y to a trust. So here the amount of Rs 10,000 is paid by Mr. Y is by reason of purchase of furniture. Hence, Rs 10,000 will be treated as consideration for sale of furniture. Thereby, Mr. X is liable to pay GST of Rs 10,000 in addition to the value of the furniture. What does it mean? It means that Mr. X sells office furniture to Mr. Y on the condition that donation of Rs 10,000 is payable by Mr. Y to a trust. Here, supplier of the goods is Mr. X and he supplied goods to Mr. Y. So Mr. Y is the purchaser of the goods, but the agreement of sale specifies that Mr. Y should have to make a donation of Rs 10,000 to a trust. In spite of paying the amount for getting purchase of the furniture from Mr. X, Mr. Y has to pay Rs 10,000 as donation to a trust, and this term is specified in the agreement of the sale. Now here Mr. Y pay Rs 10,000 as donation to the trust only because of sale of the goods by sale of the furniture by Mr. X to Mr. Y. So here the consideration will include the amount of the donation that is specified in the sales agreement, which is to be made by Mr. Y to the trust. So here the Rs 10,000, that means the amount of the donation that is made by the purchaser Mr. Y to a trust, will also form the part of the consideration in addition to the amount that is to be paid by Mr. Y to Mr. X. So here Rs 10,000 is also taxable under GST norms. Next, Messrs. Lakshman Limited agreed to sell its business to Messrs. Ram Limited for a consideration of Rs 50 lakh. Here the agreement for sale of the business is made between Messrs. Lakshman Limited and Messrs. Ram Limited. Here Messrs. Lakshman Limited will sell business, agreed to sell its business to Messrs. Ram Limited, and the amount of the consideration it comes to Rs 50 lakh. Now Messrs. Lakshman Limited further agree that it will not conduct the same or similar business for a period of 10 years. So here after sell its business, Messrs. Lakshman Limited agree that it will not conduct same type of the business or similar type of the business for the coming 10 years. and for on this agreement, on this term, the agreement of the sale is materialized. At the time of the sale, Messrs. Luxmon Limited collect the consideration of rupee 50 lakh from Messrs. Ram Limited. This amount is received by Messrs. Luxmon Limited for selling its business to Messrs. Ram Limited. But with this, Messrs. Luxmon Limited also collect rupees 20 lakhs from Messrs. Ram Limited on the condition that it will not doing the same type of the business. It will not run same type of the business for the coming 10 years also. Now, this is called the forbearance of an act. Here, Messrs. Luxmon Limited making agreement with the Ram Limited that it will not conduct same type of the business or similar business for coming 10 years, and with this, for this condition, on the fulfilling of this condition, it will receive rupees 20 lakh in addition of rupees 50 lakh from Messrs. Ram Limited, and this additional amount of rupees 20 lakh is for forbearance of an act, and we know that forbearance, any amount received against forbearance of an act or activity, is also constitute part of the consideration. So here the entire amount of rupees 50 lakh, that means the amount of consideration that is generated for sale of business by Messrs. Luxmon Limited to Messrs. Ram Limited, there will be additional amount of rupees 20 lakh also because of the amount that is received by Messrs. Luxmon Limited for forbearance of the act on the ground that it will not conduct similar type of the business for coming 10 years. So here the entire consideration comes to rupees 70 lakh, on which GST is to be payable by Messrs. Luxmon Limited. Now, we know that if there is no consideration, then if there is no consideration, then there will be no GST. Though there are some exceptions also in respect of the item that has been clarified in Schedule 1 of CGST ACT 2017. For that item, there are 4 items. So for that items, even if there is no consideration, then it may be taken as the taxable event. But for the rest of the case, if there is no consideration, there will be no GST. Now, first example is that Mr. Rajesh during long drive with his wife Manju violated the traffic rules and was imposed fine of rupees 1000. Mr. Rajesh during long drive with his wife Manju violated the traffic rules and imposed fine of rupees 1000. Now the amount received as fine or penalty for violation of the statutory provision will not considered as consideration. Violation payment, that means the payment received on account of fine or penalty for violation of any statutory provision is not to be taken as consideration. Since it is not a consideration, it is not to be taken as consideration, there will be no GST on the amount of fine that is collected. Now, the following generally not considered as consideration. That means here grant of pocket money, gift or reward which has not been given in terms of reciprocity, or the amount on alimony for divorce. These are the amount of cash, amount of money that is received by any person But these are not to be taken as consideration because specific activities are not associated with these consideration, with these receipt. We generally as a student receive pocket money from our parent, but this is the consideration. But what is the activity behind this consideration? What is the supply of services behind this consideration? There is no definite service or activity that is being generated against such consideration of pocket money. So, since consideration is there, but there is no supply of goods or services, it not to be considered as taxable event, and for why pocket money does not constitute consideration, as per section 2 in bracket 2 subsection 31 as per CGST Act 2017. Similarly, gift or reward, which has not been given in terms of reciprocity, here also gift or reward may be received by any person, and normally it is a consideration that is generated. But what is the activity? What is the supply? What is the supply of goods and services against this consideration? Is there any specific activities? Is there any specific activities against this consideration? Is there any specific supply of goods and services that are made against gift or reward? No, there is no such activity that is to be made against gift or reward, since there is no definite or no specific activities or no specific supply of goods or services that needs to be made against rewards or gift. So gift or reward does not form part of the consideration as per section 231 of CGST Act 2017, and that's why on gift, on rewards, there will be no GST. But if the gift is made on the condition of reciprocity, then it will be taken as consideration and GST will be there. Similarly, amount paid on alimony of divorce, alimony for divorce. Here lump sum consideration is received by anyone for divorce. But what is the specific activity? What is the supply of goods and services against such amount received by such person? There is no definite activity, there is no definite supply of goods and services that needs to be made against the amount of the alimony made at the time of divorce. So that should not be taken as consideration as per section 231 of CGST Act 2017, and since it is not forming part of the consideration, there will be no GST on the amount of alimony that is received on account of divorce.